You also touched on a tumultuous offseason. It has been really a year of tumultuous and ups and downs, starting with beginning of 2026, or rather the end of 2025, Coastal parts ways with Tim Beck. And that was from what was reported, a mutual parting of ways. They shook hands, didn't work out. And then they move on to Missouri State head coach Ryan Beard. Then you have, of course, which we're going to start with, the Kevin Schnall situation. Just as a whole, from the beginning of 2026 till now, I mean, you've covered the Chanticleers for a very long time. You're seeing two major head coach changes in the athletic department. What has this time been like for you as kind of that observer and someone who's seen a lot of this happen before? Like, what are your first impressions?
Well, it's certainly fascinating, right? I mean, in all the years that I was around, I never saw anything like two major head coaches in one season. I think back to how tumultuous it was when the university and then President Dr. David DeCenzo made the decision to move on from David Bennett after 9 seasons. Well, really 10, because we had a year where we got prepared in 2002, and then the first year was 2003. And we had a tremendous amount of success from 2003 to 2006. It was incredible to watch. 34-11 and 3 conference championships, and big time players that came through. And then from 2007 through the end of the 2011 season, it just we just didn't do a lot. I mean, we just didn't. And then the decision was made to part ways with Coach Bennett and bring Joe Moglia in. And I remember, wow. I mean, 15 years later, I can still remember how tumultuous that was and how that caused all kind of rankled feelings. I don't know how you even put it, to be honest with you, but I kind of remember that. I remember that, right? I mean, all that just kind of comes back to me at 15 years later. But I mean, I've never seen a situation where we lose 2 head coaches, one because he was let go and the other because he decided to move on in 6 months of each other, literally. I mean, yeah, it's been crazy. I mean, I think the Tim Beck situation was kind of, I think that was inevitable. I think, and I'm going to put this out there too. I think the end of the Jamie Chadwell era was mishandled, quite frankly. I'll say that. I don't, there are a lot of people would disagree with me and say that he was just looking for a big payday. He was going to leave anyway. I don't necessarily believe that. I've never believed that, quite frankly. But as it turned out, Tim Beck was his replacement, and I just don't think Coach Beck was ever a great fit. I mean, nothing against him personally. I worked with him 1 season in 23. We got along fine. Had no real personal problems with him, but it just him and a couple of others that got put in positions of authority, they just didn't work out. And then the whole thing just, the reason Coastal won 6 games last year was because of a kid named Samari Collier, quite frankly. And they weren't even going to play him until everybody else got hurt. And kind of forced him to go on the field. Next thing you know, we start winning, and then he goes down, and then that was pretty much the end of that. But the whole thing with Coach Beck just didn't work. And now we have Ryan Beard, right, who has a track record of success elsewhere, and I'm excited, for what he's bringing in. Out hustle. I can't wait to watch it. Yeah, and then, of course, once he came on board, then we go through the baseball season, and then things start happening at South Carolina with Paul Maneri. And when it was clear that he wasn't going to be sticking around, all of a sudden the names started popping up as, okay, who's going to replace him? And, of course, the number one name was Kevin Schnall, right? And then we get to the end of April, and we're 31-10, I think, or 30-11, maybe something like that. It was one of those two, and we're steaming right on along with all the flaws that this baseball team had this year, particularly on offense. This team was still in great position at the end of April, but something happened right in there when the conversation started. Down we went 6-10 in May, and just didn't look right. And then next thing you know, Kev goes to South Carolina, and Coach Lemonis comes in, and I think he was kind of one of those guys, in my opinion, was always at the top of any list. Whether anybody believed that, I thought with him being out of work, but him being a Myrtle Beach guy, went to the Citadel, won a national championship at Mississippi State. He was a guy that you thought, okay, he would make a really logical choice to replace Kevin Schnall. But
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head with him being a Myrtle Beach native, having those connections. And I mean, he seems like he's so excited for that job in particular, and being able to come back to where he says he and his family growing up, like that was a second home to him, like that. I think it's a amazing fit. And when you win a national championship within the last 5 years, that definitely adds to the resume a little bit.
No doubt about it. And I love the staff that he's put together. I really love the fact that he kept Matt Schilling around. I mean, great to see Schill stick around and keep some of that Gary Gilmore culture around. I wish we could have kept a few more guys, but Schill sticking around is fantastic. And I'm glad that was able to happen. I know that, obviously Kev took a bunch of guys with him to Columbia. Connor Owings is the guy he took to Columbia. Now Connor Owings is at Georgia Southern. So, I mean, it's kind of like you're scratching your head. You're going like, how are things really going with that transition? But I just want to go back to just some of the things that happened, and I love Kevin Schnall. I really do. I mean, nothing against him at all. It was a matter of time, probably after last year, that you figured, if you know him, he's an ambitious guy. Every coach is always looking for that next job, right? And I know that Kev's in our Hall of Fame because what he did as a player, and then obviously an assistant coach for 2 decades plus and whatnot. The heir apparent to Gilmore for a lot of years, and finally he takes the job in 2025. We have that unbelievable season last year, eyelash of a national championship, right? So no surprise that people come knocking on the door like Tennessee last year. And if you believe that he was, they put an offer sheet on the table, 7 figures, and he turns it down. Well, guess what? Here we are again this past season, winning big. Maneri gets let go at South Carolina. Monty Lee's not going to be the guy, so who's going to be the next guy? So they're going to put an offer on the table for Kevin Schnall. I kept seeing people, just swear up and down he's not going to leave. There's no way he's taking that job. And I kept, I've kept scratching my head going, guys, y'all just need to. I wouldn't be saying much of anything because you just can't put it past anybody to do anything these days in college athletics. That's the way it is. It's a money chase, right? Administrators and coaches and players, they're all chasing the money. And if you're Kevin Schnall and you've already turned down a 7-figure offer somewhere, those don't come along every day. They just don't. And people swearing up and down, oh, he'll never leave. Well, I'm like, he may very well take that job. I thought there was always a great chance he would take that job. And I'll tell you this. I'll tell you a story. July 4th, I was at a family get together up at the lake here. I live not far from Lake Wateree, and one of my family members, my wife's nephew, is a pitching coach at a college here in South Carolina. And I've told this, people who know me know who it is, right? I'm not going to say it here, but he and I talk baseball a lot. He's very well connected with other coaches, knows all our coaches, knows a lot of other guys too. And he looks at me and we're talking about this thing, and he says, the South Carolina job wasn't really the job that Schnall wanted, but it was the one that he had to take.
Absolutely.
It was like 100%. It was the one that he had to take. Florida was the big one, right? I mean, people thought O'Sullivan might have been gone after this year. And I think he would have been gone if they hadn't figured things out late. And Kevin Schnall probably would have been offered that job. But South Carolina wasn't necessarily the one that he wanted. But he put that kind of money out there. It was the one he had to take. The problem that I have on TJ, and I don't want to run too long with this, the problem that I have is kind of the way that he left, right? Some of the things that he said really just kind of rankled me, and I know a lot of other people, and the way that he kind of bit back at some people. He called some folks up and, who took him to task for some things. He was calling people up the morning that it was announced he took the South Carolina job. Early in the morning, he's calling people up because he's like, I don't know what that was about. Social media, phone calls, or whatnot, but I think he got some bite back from some folks, some blowback. Talking about this the South Carolina 2010 regional is one of the most disappointing and bitter losses in the history of coastal athletics, not just baseball. Losing that regional was one of those bitter defeats, because if anybody knows the dynamic of South Carolina and coastal, you understand it, right? I mean, there's that split in 93, a lot of hard feelings in Columbia, a lot of hard feelings in Conway, and they've never gone away. They just haven't. And for him to sit there and talk about, him walking out of that regional after South Carolina won, 2 one-run games, and we never really could get our pitching straight the entire weekend. If we had that, we might beat those guys, and we might have won the championship in 2010. But him talking about wanting to be part of that, I mean, come on, man. I mean, there were just some things that were said I think were completely unnecessary, but didn't do himself any favors. But it'll be interesting to see how this plays out over the course of the coming years. But
and I think an added element to everything you just said, like the things that were said and the things that happened, but also there was a lot of confusion on social media. I mean, you watched this one post from this one account that says he's taken the job about a week and a half before it actually happened. And this was right around the time that the Teal Syndicate Twitter page was just starting up. And I looked at that and I didn't see Kendall Rogers confirming it. I didn't see anything coming out of South Carolina. I didn't see anything coming out of Coastal Carolina. And I made my calls. I was like, hey, what's going on here? Like, is there actually some truth to this? And I couldn't get anything from anybody. So we finally come out and say, this is not confirmed. And I think that when Teal Syndicate did that, when a lot of the other places did that, covering Coastal Carolina, I think a lot of people also got some hope from that. About maybe this is just the craziness that is occurring because of the new social media era and the internet. It's just doing its thing. And then a week and a half later, we're talking about maybe days after the Gianna Forbes interview with Chance Miller. And Chance Miller said, I just talked to him earlier today. We're talking about Omaha in 2027. And then a couple days later, he's the head coach in Columbia. So I think that there's what you said and the feelings between Coastal Carolina and South Carolina, but media definitely played a role in the way that people are feeling, I feel like.
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of my feeling was when we got beat in Tallahassee that it wouldn't be if this was going to happen, it would be maybe a day or two after we get back, right? After we get back from that trip.
Yeah, the timeline's weird too. Yeah.
Yeah, that's when it was good. And we didn't hear anything. Nobody heard really anything in terms of like you're talking about the reporting. I mean, no one really reported anything being confirmed. Just still it was rumor central for, another full week or so. It's like, and the longer it kind of dragged on, you kind of felt like, well, I mean, if they've not named him if he's the number one guy, and Coastal is out of the picture. There's no more baseball to be played. You want to, and with the portal and all that stuff going on, you want to get a guy in here quickly, and it just didn't happen that way.
Well, also from South Carolina's standpoint, right? They're trying to compete in the SEC. The portal plays a role on them too.
Sure.
So a week, 10 days into the portal, that change, little confusing, right?
And Scott Forbes' name all of a sudden popped up as a guy, and I never really thought that was a serious. I didn't think that was kind of a serious thing. Maybe an agent trying to get his coach in there to maybe get some leverage. I don't know what that was, but I mean, anyway, that all of a sudden, his name pops up. But yeah, I mean, it took a while, and then of course when he is announced as the South Carolina coach that he was going to South Carolina, that's when it all. That's when it all broke loose. And by then, I mean, Coastal's roster was down to not many guys. And then you had a bunch of guys. Yeah, it's like, what is going on? I mean, was he sitting there taking that South Carolina job and making roster moves? I mean, I think that he was. I absolutely believe that he was.
I mean, it's strange. The one thing that Joe Katz said, it's very strange to think that if you're going to take the job, why you're doing exit meetings and suggesting, because we've heard from a couple of different players, why are you suggesting they move on, right? Colby Thorndike is a great example. He goes to Francis Marion. That's a guy who started for Coastal and was a part of a platoon this year at first base. He takes another position elsewhere, reportedly because he was told to. And same thing with Jackson Appleman and some other guys. I don't want to put words in their mouth, but this is just stuff that I'm hearing. Yep. And then Kevin Schnall takes another job. So it's a very interesting way that this all went down.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And again, going back to tell you another quick story too, going back to what, Kev mentioned about wanting to be part of that fan base after the 2010 loss. I can tell you somebody that that in a million years would have never taken that job, and that would be Gary Gilmore, because I was at Gary Gilmore's Hall of Fame induction last fall. I was actually a guest of Matt Hogue. Because Matt hired me at Coastal, and he invited me to come to his Hall of Fame. And of course, Matt and Gilly, and they were going in on the same night. And Gilly had his speech was the last one of the night, and he spoke for a while. And of course, he deserved to speak for as long as he wanted to. One of the last stories that he told was that 2010 regional and how bitter that was, and how when it was over and he was one of the last people in that stadium walking out, how some South Carolina people were just giving it to him. I mean, and it just made him just red hot with anger and fury. And you could, anybody sitting in that room that night could feel it and sense it and tell it just how much that hurt him, and how angry he was at how that whole thing went down, how there were, South Carolina people in Pelicans Park all over the place. And, if you don't think that the 2016 national championship team is the best that Coastal ever had, or even 2025, that 2010 team is the best. I mean, those three teams, whoever has a poll, whoever has an opinion, that 2010 team was national championship worthy easily. And that loss was a bitter, bitter pill for Gilly to swallow, which still burns him to this day. And then to hear Schnall say what he said about it, like I'd love to be part of that fan base one day. Just really just blows me away. It really does. I'm like, man, geez, you might be on an island on that one, because I don't think anybody else in Teal would have wanted to be part of that.